For the Dixon Public Library's Oral History Project. Today, July 28th, 1998, I'm talking to Mr. Ken McGrew. My name is Paul Ferrell. We're in Ken McGrew's home here in Dixon. Well, let's start with some family history. What kind of family history do you know?
Well, my folks came to Dixon in 1918, and he first worked in Woodland at a rice dryer. Then he came to Dixon and lived on his cousin's ranch out here on Evans Road, which was named Mose McGrew. And he worked at the California Meal Alfalfa Company. And he worked there until he retired. I was born in '24 in a wooden clinic, and came back to Dixon. And our first home was over there at Charlie Craig's place, over there where the swimming pool's built now, but it was just a grain field then. And we lived there, I can't remember how many years. We moved up to the hay house where the Dixon dryer used to be, but now it's all been changed and tore down. Then we bought a place over on North First Street. My mom and dad did, and we lived there until I went into the service. But the biggest part of the thing was during the Depression, it was pretty tough around Dixon. So as a little kid, when the Doyle Dairy was in business, well, we'd always wait in the summer months till the north wind would blow, and I'd get my little wagon out and a sack, and I'd go down there in Doyle's Lane, going to the Doyle Dairy, and pick up walnuts to make a few nickels. And we would get 50 cents a sack, and you could really make a lot of money at those days. 50 cents went a long ways. You'd go to the Gerlach Theater downtown here for a nickel and buy an ice cream cone for a nickel. We can't do that today. And after I got a little older, well, I bought a bicycle and I delivered the newspaper from Bill Gerlach's store. And
You did that with your walnut money?
yeah, and Bill Gerlach's old store now is Robbie Robbins' store, and it had a soda fountain and a dance floor in there, and a candy counter. And I started delivering papers for him in the morning. It was the Chronicle and Examiner in the morning, and then in the afternoon it was the Oakland Tribune and Call Bulletin. And as I got a little bit older, making money, and I went over to the mill where my dad was working, and he was manager of the mill over there, and I used to run the spoolies up there where the hay came in on the old rubber tire wagons, and the spoolies were up in the air about 200 feet, and I would work there at night.
What's a spoolie?
The spoolies is where they had cables going down through the big telephone poles, you know, and the Jackson Fork could go out and pick up the hay off of the wagons and throw them in big piles. And then they would, they call it the hoedown, where they would rake the hay into this elevator and go in, they'd grind it up and make meal alfalfa and stuff like that for cattle and stuff, and the dairies and stuff around town here.
Now, what was your father's business? You said he was manager of the mill.
Mill, California Meal Alfalfa Company. Where they ground hay, and all the hay was alfalfa hay out in the country. Bill Wine owned quite a few acreage, and they would stack this hay up on these old hard rubber tires, and they would pull them in town. And of course the mill is all gone now, it's all tore down. And they would make feed out of it, and the feed would go all over the country. They'd ship it by rail too. The rail used to come into town.
Did they do any grain storage or just milling the grain?
Yeah, on the other place they had a flour mill right next to it, and they would roll barley and make flour and stuff like that. It was all, he owned both the places. But the biggest deal was, you tell people that you work for 17 cents an hour, they wouldn't believe it, but that was a lot of money in those days. You work all week and make $7 or $8, that was a lot of money. And then, well, I went to school here in town, and
well, now you're from a kind of a town family, not a farm family then.
no, I lived in town all my life until I went into the service.
And your father was always with the mill?
Always with the mill until he retired. And then he, after he retired from the mill, he did clean up the bank and clean up the 2 bars downtown, my mom and him, until they retired from there. And but the town was what I liked about the town then, you knew everybody in town. The population was 700 or 800 people, and you'd go down the street and you'd speak to somebody. Well, you just knew everybody. But today, you don't know anybody. We're a satellite community of Sacramento. And people travel all the way to San Francisco to work nowadays. You know, they drive. But
well, now you mentioned the Depression, but you were born in 24. So is there any what's your earliest memories of here in Dixon?
Of the town?
You as a small boy, what do you remember?
Well, we had to make up our own games and stuff like that, and play kick the can, or we had a old golf course here in town. I don't know if anybody told you about that.
No.
It was a 9-hole golf course. It's where the city hall is. It goes out through that slough out there, and the Hall family donated all that ground to the city, and they had 9 holes. It was a sand greens. And I used to caddy out there for Max Cowden and Dr. Wrigley and Dr. Hall, and go out there and pull their golf carts around, and I'd help them mow the place out there. It was just old Star Thistle stuff, you know, going down the fairways. But they kept that up for quite a few years, and they moved when Carl Smeisner, they built their home over there. They moved the big barn over there where the senior citizen center is now, and they had that as their clubhouse and stuff like that. And everything we did in town was all donated, or we did our own work ourselves. But then a little later on, after Dr. Hall donated that ground, well, they built a swimming pool. It was all built mostly by Bill Wine's laborers, all donation. And we'd go over there and we'd help what we could to build this swimming pool. And all us kids over there, we'd go help clean up the pool. And George White, I can remember him, he used to run the place, and the work we did over there, we'd get free swimming. So then Dr. Hall and Wrigley and a lot of the old timers, Dr. Flores and Dr. Parsons, every morning around 6 o'clock they'd have a swimming. All the old fellas would go over there and swim in the morning. And but that was we had to make our own recreation here in town. And
well, being in town, I guess there must have been a little more recreation. Well, I should say different recreation than people out on the farm. You had, you had a theater.
We had a theater. We had a baseball
pool.
Field down there, where, and that was really a thing in Dixon. Every weekend they'd have a baseball game, and the Royers and all them, they're great baseball players. And
were they Dixon versus Vacaville?
Oh yeah, and. Elmira, of course, there's not much of a town there, but people would get together, and Winters and Davis. Davis was a small town then too, and it was a lot of fun. And in fact, Petty Stearns and I, we sold peanuts at the ball games, and we'd go to Sacramento and we'd pick up the peanuts and come home and bag them up and sell peanuts for 2 bits a bag or 15 cents a bag. And and one thing about I liked then and I don't like now is, when Sunday came around, Saturday you better get your grocery shopping done, or get your gas for your car, because all the stores and everything was closed on Sunday. Everybody was supposed to go to church or day of rest, but you know how it is nowadays. It's you got to get everything you can. You can shop anytime you want.
Well, what about those kind of things? Organizations and things that got people together. Of course, there's church.
The church, and then
what else?
You had your lodges and the Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts. Well, of course, she's a Cub Scout, and then you got to be a Boy Scout.
Were you a Boy Scout?
Yeah.
So was I.
Yeah. I still have my old book here, Pug Parsons, with Dr. Parsons' son, he was the scoutmaster here, and I still got some of his signatures and stuff, which goes back a little over 50 years, you know.
Uh-huh.
And we had our little clubs to get together, and we had a scout camp down there by where this city corp yard is now. We had an old log cabin down there. We had our camp outs on the weekends, and especially in the summer months. Mm-hmm. And it was, we never got in too much trouble. Mm. And we had our theater here in town, which we'd go to. It didn't cost you too much money, 5 cents or 10 cents to get in. And like I said, we had baseball and got together with roller skates and skating, and we kept ourselves busy. We'd better, or you get a licking if you get home, if you get in trouble.
Well, you know, everybody, well, not everybody, but most of the people I talk to have been out on the farm, and they always mention the chores they have to do. So what did a kid in town, what kind of
we
chores
had
did you
chickens.
have to do? Oh, you had chickens?
Had chickens, and then we'd go over to Dave Webb's. He had pigeons, and then Bartok's, they would raise pigs. We'd go over and get buy the hog, and I remember come home, and Dad and them, they'd grind it all up, and we would had a big grill. We would fry the patties on this grill. We would save the lard, and we would put the patties in a crock pot, you know, what do you call it? It was a crock.
Big slow cooking kind of.
No, it was in a crock.
Uh-huh.
And then you'd put the patties down and pour this hog oil all over the top of it, lard, and you better make sure that would keep it. And you better make sure when you went in there in the morning to pull one out that you better cover up that hole, because they would start getting sour. And that's how we kept our meat down in the basement.
Preserve the meat inside this
crock.
In the crock, and the meat's buried in kind of a oil.
Well, it turned to lard, you know.
Lard. Uh-huh.
And then we'd take the lard, and if you want to make soap, you take the lard and ashes from your fireplace, and that'd make lye soap, and it would sure clean you up. I mean, soap for the clothes and stuff like that. Uh-huh. And I remember Mom and Dad doing that, and boy, you'd better, after you dug a patty out, you'd better close that hole up, because you'd get a pretty good licking if you let it start getting sour, if you didn't keep the air away from it.
Did you have an ice box?
No, we had sacks around on a frame on the outside, and the water drip on the sacks, and that's how we kept our butter. We made our own butter and stuff, and that's how you kept your stuff cool on the outside.
The water evaporating.
Water evaporating. Something like these evaporator coolers, but we didn't have a fan on it. We just let when the air go through, and you'd keep your milk and stuff in that until the refrigerators, till you had enough money to buy a refrigerator. Mm-hmm. And then we had in town. We had 3 meat markets here in town, and we had. Bud Peters had a grocery store, and we had a Purity and a Safeway downtown. And I guess they've told you about Dawson's used to be across the street. Mm-hmm. And well, when Johnson's sold out, Dawson's went across the street to Johnson's hardware store, and Johnson's hardware store went up to where Denton Barker had a store, with Stuart Grady had a store there. Then Johnson's moved up there, hardware store, and then when they went out of business, they sold it to Denton Barker, and he had a grocery store and a meat market in there for years. And after he went out of there, Western Store came in, and it was there for quite a while, until I think a bank came in later on. The old First Northern Bank used to be over there where the Elks Lodge is. It used to be right next door, where there's a little tanning shop in there now. Mm-hmm. That's where they they called it Dixon Bank then, they called it then. Until they...
I think that building dates back to the 1880s.
Yeah, I have a thing here. of the name of the Dixon Bank on it, and then they moved over. They built a place, then they tore that down and built another one. And the Bank of America, they put a new building in, and they came in. There's a soda fountain over there, quite a few, and a Wagley Garage was over there. Of course, that's all gone now. And,
you mentioned a soda fountain. Was that in Kirby's drugstore?
Look, Gerlach's had a soda fountain. Kirby's had a soda fountain. The gym, where there's a barber shop there now, they had a soda fountain.
Well, you know, a lot of people nowadays don't even know what a soda fountain is. What's a soda fountain?
Well,
I'm not even clear on that.
You could go in and order yourself a soda, which they had big jars up there. You want lemon, lime, or whatever you want, the flavor of it. They would put this carbonated water in and put the flavor in with the ice. And, well, you could order a banana split or ice cream or anything you want, what they called a soda fountain then. I don't know what they call it now. I still call it a soda fountain. We have one. We have a home up at Lake Almanor at Chester. They have a soda fountain up there, and we always make it's a drugstore. Most of the time it was a drugstore with a soda fountain. Kirby's was a soda fountain, a drugstore, and the gym was a soda fountain, a drugstore. And but Gerlach's was just a plain soda fountain where you could get sandwiches and stuff like that. But,
well, tell me a little bit about. Before we talk about high school, what about grammar school? What grammar school did you go to? You went to Dixon Grammar School.
Dixon. I went through all the school here.
You know, some people tell me that there was a kind of split when you got to high school between the country kids and the town kids.
Well, the country kids, after they go to the 8th grade, they had to come into town to high school. The grammar school over here was real neat. Mr. Jacobs was the principal there while I was there, and every morning before you went into class, you had to line up outside and salute the flag, and then each class would march into their room. And we had a basketball court in that school there, but it's all tore down now. I mean, they said it was earthquake not safe. Even the high school, the biggest joke about the high school, after they tore it down, well, they tried to tear it down, they had to get Walt Peffley came in and hire a guy for dynamite to blow the thing down, because they couldn't get it down with a wrecking ball and everything else.
I've seen pictures. That was a beautiful building.
It would still be there. It'd be better school than what it is now. I mean, better classes. And they had a handball court down in the basement where you could go down and play handball. And I used to go down there. And Mr. Ferguson was the janitor there at the school, and he would let us go down after school and play handball. And they'd let you go over to the gym and play basketball too after the school was closed. Because you had to do right, because no mischief, or he'd kick you out. He'd close it up on you. But kids were pretty well behaved then, a lot better than what it is now.
Now, well, speaking of high school, dances was a pretty big thing, wasn't it? Kind of as a social occasion, the kids getting together to have dances.
Yeah. We had dances, I think once a month at school. I'm not sure. I couldn't quote you on that. They'd have dances, and of course it was all by records, you know. And I think it was once a month or something like that. We'd have dances at the school. They don't have it anymore.
I didn't realize it was by records. I thought you had a live band there.
No, it was all by records. In fact, I got a lot of the old 40 records here that I'd like to get somebody to put it on tape where I could sit and put it in my TV and listen to it, you know, on recorder. But it's pretty hard.
You knew Gordon Marvin.
Yeah. His dad owned the Marvin Garage down here where the post office is, and he had a band for a long time. He used to come and play for us, the fire department. We always had a Christmas and New Year's dance. He used to come and play for us. But his sister passed away, but his mother lived here for a long time down here in West A Street. And the house is still there, but the garage, it burnt down. We had a pretty good fire there, and it was made into a plumbing shop. And it caught fire, and it burnt that down, and burnt house next to it down. I drove one of the pumpers to that fire there. I was in the fire department then. And
Now these dances, they worked as a fundraising activity, didn't they? I mean,
for the high school.
no, I mean like you said, the fire department.
Oh yeah, we had Christmas dance.
So you would charge
Yeah,
$1
we would
or
charge,
something?
and then we always had sandwiches at midnight. We danced till 2 o'clock, and we really had a big turnout, and we would really decorate it. It'd take us a week to decorate the old hall down there, because the hall is gone now. They built a new one, and we'd have the big old light we'd rent from Sacramento with the sparklings goes around, and we'd put aluminum on the side, and we'd go up in the hills, and went up to Fall River Mills with Bob Shellhammer one time to get Christmas trees to put all around the walls and stuff like that. And we had, it was a fundraiser, and we did real well. And we'd always donate the money to a baseball team or the Cub Scouts or whoever we needed a little bit of help, we'd donate it. And that finally stopped that, and then we started having a dance there at the Legion Hall. And I think it was mostly for the baseball team. And that's when the fire department got together with Ross Hannon and Rossi and a bunch of the guys here in town, and they played instruments, and they had their own band, just like the Philharmonics now. They had their own band. They were affiliated with the fire department, and that's the reason why they called it Dixon Philharmonics. You probably heard of that, haven't you?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, they had this old American La France 1921 fire truck, and they go through the parades and stuff.
Oh, I heard about that fire truck.
Yeah, yeah. I used to drill on that when Mr. Ferguson, Glenn Ferguson, was fire chief, and I was just a little kid, and I used to ride on the back end of that truck, and they'd go down and practice. And that was their first line truck till 1942 or 43, until we bought the new Fabrico. And
Now you were a little kid, and they let you ride on the back of that truck.
yeah, I was about 13, 14 years old. Of course, everything was volunteer then. It's not volunteer anymore. It's all paid. And but I spent 50 years in the fire department. And
Yeah, let's talk about the volunteer fire department. How did it work? Tell me all about it.
well, you had to go through training and stuff through the fire department, and they had first of all, they had the big bell uptown, and which is on the tower. Well, it's out at the new firehouse now, and they would hammer on that bell where they draw the people into the firehouse. There was a fire someplace, and then that cracked one winter. We had a real cold winter here, and we had a fire, and they started to ring it, and it broke the bell. So that's when they got the fire siren they put up there, and then they would first we had the codes. It would be 4 short and 1 long would be on the east side, or the other codes would be on the west side. We would quit using that because you couldn't remember the codes. So we just had it, we would pull the handle down on the box up there, and it would ring so long, or if you want to ring it twice, if it was a big fire. And then all the volunteers would come into the fire station and take the trucks and go out and fight the fire. And we were one of the best volunteer fire departments in the state for quite a few years. And it didn't take us very long to get to the fire and go out and put it out. And two biggest fires we had here, I was in the fire department then, it started out here by the Valley Livestock, and it burned all the way to Bird's Landing. And Vacaville and all the other fire departments, we didn't have radios then, all got together, and even the gas trucks here in town emptied all their gas out of it and started hauling water to the to the fire trucks. And it burned all the way to Bird's Landing. And of course, at that time, there was no irrigation. Right past the cemetery, the Bloom Ranch was the last of the irrigation. Everything was just dry grass or wheat or something, and no fire breaks or anything. But nowadays, they farm all the way down to almost to Rio Vista, with irrigation and stuff. And the other fire had started off of the Yolo Causeway up there. And that's when the Sacramento Northern quit running their electric train from Sacramento down to Suisun. It burnt the bridge out and the bypass, so they never repaired it. And it burned all the way to Liberty Island. And that was the end of the Sacramento Northern, the old electric train. But then they had had another electric train that ran from Dixon down towards to Rio Vista, but it didn't last very long. It started over there at Marvin's Garage, and I forgot the name that they called it, but it didn't last very long.
Started at Marvin's Garage.
Marvin's Garage went out through town and went right down 113. You could still see the berms where the track used to be.
Did Gordon start that fire?
Pardon?
Did Gordon start that fire?
At the garage?
Yeah.
No, they were already gone by then.
Oh.
There was a plumbing shop in there, and they were doing something that got into some of the gasoline, and it burned it down. I can't remember the date. And then
Tyke Thompson told me about a big hotel fire.
that was 1918 or 1919.
Oh, was that far back?
Yeah. And that's when Vacaville came in with their American LaFrance and pumped water on the hotel fire, and then that's when the Dixon got together, the people got together and donated enough money to buy a fire truck. They didn't have a fire truck.
That's where it all started then.
Yeah, they just had a hose cart and a big old pike pole and a ladder they had to run with. And at the firehouse, the new firehouse, they got all the hose companies and stuff like that, which my dad's name is on it. And then
Now your dad was a fireman as well.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He when he quit, Bloom's had a fire out the Bloom Ranch right across from the cemetery. The barn burnt down, and this old American LaFrance, you could go out of one stall and go in another stall. Of course, they just had an old tent shed then, and they went around the corner down there, and it went on two wheels. And Dad, after they came back, he got off of it and he quit. He said he wasn't going to get killed in a fire truck. And but we had a good fire department here. My three sons, well, my brother Emery, he was assistant chief in Colusa, and he went through the fire department here. My three sons went through as a volunteer fireman here, and they're all paid firemen now, and just about ready to retire. One's in San Lorenzo. Rodney and Robert was with the fire department in American River in Sacramento. And Timmy, my youngest son, he's a fireman in Woodland. But the two twins, they got about 3 more years till they retire from the fire department. And they can hardly wait to get out of it because it's a mess now. Of so much drugs, you know, and politics are in the fire departments. And like Rodney down there in San Lorenzo, he says it's terrible. He goes to work for a 24-hour shift, and he says sometimes it's 24 hours they're on working all the time, you know, night and day. And he's a captain down there, and he acts sometimes as a battalion chief down there too. But he lives up here in the hills, Camel Road.
Yeah, that's a tough job. I did another oral history project with Sacramento.
Yeah.
I'll have to tell you about that later. It's stressful.
It's stressful, yeah. And it's so much drugs into it now, and shootings too as you go to a fire. I mean, look at L.A. I mean, they shoot at the firemen and everything else. It's not nice anymore.
That put it mildly.
Yeah.
To go back on something you said, you mentioned, I think you mentioned 3 or 4 doctors.
Yeah, there was
Dr. Hall you mentioned.
Dr. Hall. I think he was a veterinarian. I'm not quite sure. I lived right next to him over there. There's Dr. Hall, Dr. Flores, Dr. Parsons, and Dr. Stolley. And Stolley's office is where the old post office used to be downtown across from the Bank of America. Big old 2-story building. His office is upstairs, which Dr. Wrigley's office was upstairs too. He was a dentist. And
that seems like an awful lot of doctors for a small town.
Well,
4 doctors.
Yeah. Dr. Parson, he was a dentist, and Dr. Wrigley was a dentist, and the 2 medical doctors was Dr. Stolley and Dr. Flores.
Oh,
and they were good doctors. I mean, at their time, you know. Dr. Stolley, he had a wooden leg, but he was a good old doctor, though. And he lived right across from the old city hall, in that big brick building.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be a brick fence around that, but they've tore the brick fence down now. It had chain links, you know, through the bricks, you know.
Whoops. I was afraid of that. Hold on. Let me turn over this tape. Okay, the tape ran out there. Now let's see. We just mentioned Dr. Stolley.
Stolley's, and then Dr. Flores was upstairs, you know, where Barbara's dress shop is. He had a office up there, and he's a pretty nice guy. And I can't remember the other doctors that came into town a little later on, but they were our mainstay while we were young and growing up here in town.
Mm-hmm.
So the other doctors came in, and they built over there across from the old Parties Market. They built an office there for some doctors, and they built this new one out here on West A Street. There's a bunch of doctors over there. But Dixon, I sure enjoyed it when I was small. I mean, you knew all the people, just about all the people, and the farmers would come into town on Friday and Saturday, get their shopping done, and stop at the Acme Club or Dawson's. The Acme Club was a bar that Thompson's owned at that time, and then Dawson's always owned that Dawson's bar there. And that was a lot of sheep and a lot of cattle had been sold and bought there at Dawson's. And I worked out at Stoven's. Mr. Stoven, he did a lot of his buying and selling cattle there at the Dawson's bar. And they got they still have a restaurant in there. They had a restaurant there too at that time. But and then like our grocery stores, it was all hometown people owned them, you know. And but it was a lot of fun.
Now what about the city government here in Dixon? Did the business owners, were they generally the ones that...
Yeah. Yeah, I can't think of them. It was the guys that Hayes was mayor one time, and mostly it was all. Of course, you voted for him. It was all volunteer. I mean, you didn't get any pay, but now you get lots of money to be on the city council. And of course, they hire everything now, you know. But then your recreation department and stuff like that was all volunteers. And if any work to be done, we'd volunteer. People would get together, go out and fix the baseball field or mow the baseball field. But most of it, there was no mowing then. I mean, it was all dirt then, you know, to put the lime down for the lines, you know, and keep care of the backstops. What bleachers we did have, we'd have to fix them ourselves. But most of the people right today, like as mayor of town, they're all business people. But it was small. It's not like it is now, you know.
Well, what about transportation? I know the train stopped here then.
Oh yeah. Now they want to build a new train station. They tore the one down here. It's Southern Pacific wanted to give them the old train station here. It's over there by the fire department where the lumber yard is. And transportation, we had the Greyhound bus that came through. The old highway used to come up right along the railroad track here and come across. I forgot what year the train hit a Greyhound bus here and killed a bunch of people. But the old highway used to come and go right through town, right on out, and went on down Pedrick Road and went around through the Swallow's Nest, went around through Davis, in through town and on out. Went through all the towns. But then the first change they made was coming down Adams Street. They changed it, and that's where I met my wife over here, the Giant Orange. She worked at the Giant Orange, and that's when the highway they changed it from Main Street, went down to Adams Street and on out, and They had two giant oranges here in town. They had one out on the old highway and one here in town.
Now, what's a giant orange? No, it's a kind
Well,
of fast food place?
No, it's a great big round thing. It looked like an orange. Had the leaves fixed on it, and you could get orange juice there.
Oh.
You'd go in. When she worked there, I used to go over and slice oranges in the other room over there for them. And you come in, you want an orange. I think you can get lime too if you wanted to. And they'd sit there and they'd squeeze the oranges and it'd come out in the glass. And they'd put ice in it and hand it to you. And it was right down here, right over here in the corner. There's no houses here then. This old house has been here since 1931 or something like that. But it's been remodeled a couple of times.
Now, you mentioned your wife, and I heard that she was Queen of the Mayfair.
Queen of the May.
Queen of the May.
Yeah.
Now, that's quite a big
And
event.
Peg Shellhammer said I was the king.
What? You were the king?
I was the king. She was the, well,
Oh.
she just said that, you know.
Oh, I see.
She was a darling lady, Mrs. Shellhammer, Peg Shellhammer.
So, that was quite an event then.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh, we had, May Day was a lot of fun, and same as the Portuguese picnic. They would donate a lot of money for the Portuguese picnic, and they would have their dance down there, and they'd have the parade in town, and Portuguese Supa, and then on Saturday night they'd have fireworks. And the biggest joke about the fireworks, no joke, they'd have these two battleships all lit up out there, and they would shoot at each other, you know, with these fireworks. And that was down there.
This was part of the Portuguese Holy Ghost parade.
Yeah, Holy Ghost parade.
Uh-huh.
And
they would shoot fireworks at each other. I never heard about that.
Oh, they had two old ships sitting out there. Well, they were made up of fireworks, you know. They would light up, you know how they do now, light up these circles and stuff like that. These pinwheel, they had big pinwheels they would light up. And at the end, these two old battle wagons, they would shoot like these Roman candles at each other, you know. And that's when they had the old wooden grandstands down here. And we had horse races at the Mayfair. And on Saturday nights, we would have motorcycle races. And Jerry Stearns, he was a police officer here in town. He used to ride a motorcycle, and he would ride the motorcycle in the races down at the fairgrounds. And I used to go to Sacramento with him too, and they had motorcycle races in Sacramento. But then that's when we had the old fairgrounds down here. Well, the city owned it then. And the city turned around and sold it to the state. And I don't know how much longer we're going to have Mayfair down here. Of course, they don't get the money from the pari-mutuel bidding like they used to support the fairs. Horse racing money is supposed to support all the fairs, you know, like the state fair and Solana Fair, and of course this is state here, and 36 agriculture fair, I think it is. But they don't get much money from the horse racing anymore, so they almost have to do their own. We've done real well the last 2 years. Of course, they've got big name bands coming in to play, and that draws the crowd in. But go back to the old Mayfair. It was a lot of fun then. Really a lot of fun.
So the Mayfair, it started with a parade, and then you ended out at the fairgrounds, and a horse race, and baseball. Somebody told me they played baseball.
Years and years ago, they played baseball down there. You know, they'd have their meet, you know, after the all summer thing going on. Whoever's the championship, or they'd have qualifications, you know, and they'd have baseball down there. But right in the middle of the fairgrounds, with a horse racing track, that's where the sewer farm was. The horses would race, go around that. I think it was a half-mile track then.
Now you say a sewer farm. That's sort of a settling ponds, is that?
Oh, they had the settling ponds and stuff right in the middle of the track. Of course, a population of 700-800. That was the, well, I know what you call it. The more educated to taking care of the sewage now than what they are in those days, you know. But it was fun. I mean, I had a lot of fun when I was a kid there until I went into the service. And, after I finished school here, and went into the service, and I came back, and I raised sheep and BB for a while, and then I finally went to work for Stoven Brothers for 30 years, retired out of there. And
Now, tell me, let's go back to that the Portuguese parade. That was, what time of year did they have that?
after, you know, I can't remember, June or July.
June or July?
Yeah,
Must have been pretty hot.
it was warm, you know, and they would. The Portuguese, we had a lot of dairies around here. Portuguese people, a lot of dairies around here, and they would donate an old cow or something like that, and they would put it in they'd bone it all out and put it in this pot, and they'd put this mint in it and other stuff in it. It was really good. I got a recipe. I make soupa here every once in a while.
Now, soupa is, what exactly is soupa?
They call it soupa. It's meat you put in it with so much water and mint and cloves, and you boil it till it gets tender. But they made their own bread, sweet bread. And that's the door, Ma.
Let me turn this off
Yeah.
while we answer the door. Okay, we just had somebody knock at the door. Now let's see. You were telling me about sopa.
Soupa.
Soupa. I'm not
Yeah.
saying it right. Soupa.
And they would boil this meat in these great big copper pots.
Mm-hmm.
And they would make their own sweet bread, and it was a giveaway. You didn't have to pay for anything. If you wanted to donate to it, fine, but you'd go in down there and you could eat all you want. And it was really delicious. And like I said, they used this mint. I lived out in the ranch, and along the canal out there, this mint that they used to put into it to season it, they used to come out there and pick it by the carloads, you know, and they would throw this mint in. And it's the same kind of mint they use for double mint gum. And they would you go down there and donate if you wanted to, and eat all the soup you want. And the best was taking the broth off of the meat and putting it on this sweet bread that they had. Of course, I use French bread here, and it was really delicious. And I forgot what year they finally quit doing it. And well, as the town grew bigger, the crowds grew bigger, and they still have it, I think, in Rio Vista. And I know Herb Dutra used to go down there before he passed away. And well, I know some people in Rio Vista. I think they still have it in Rio Vista, and they still have it in Tracy. There's a lot of Portuguese people down in Tracy. And I don't know where else they have it anymore. Portuguese get together.
So,
maybe May Azevedo would know, or you know.
Yeah.
Because she's Portuguese.
She was a queen once.
Yeah,
1931.
I think they might still have it down at Benicia too. I'm not. She's from Benicia area.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think she told me that.
Yeah, I think she's.
Now the Portuguese was a big group, and another big group is the Germans. And just this morning, I was talking to a real nice lady, Lena Yolo, and she was telling me that the other group wasn't really Italian; they were Swiss Italian.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the big three of Dixon.
Yeah.
Germans and Germans, Portuguese, and Swiss Italian.
Mostly Swiss Italian and Portuguese. There wasn't too many Germans around here. The Repkes and Rungis were Germans. They farmed out there. Well, Arnold Collier farms. He did farm when he was farming their ground. He developed it all. But the Germans, they were mostly up what they call Germantown, up north on Highway 505, or no, Highway 5. But during the war, they changed the name to Artois, because they didn't like the name of German. But that up there is mostly where all the Germans come, and they settled up in that area, as I can remember.
Now, during which war did they change that name?
World War II.
World War II.
Yeah.
Yeah, people have told me that people have changed their family names, the spelling of their family name, to sound less German after the First World War.
It was named Germantown, and then they changed it to Artois.
Artois.
Yeah. But mostly, they was just, oh goodness sakes, I couldn't name you all the dairies around here. They're all small dairies. They all milked by hand, and there was mostly all Portuguese people around here, and they really supported the Dutras and goodness, I can't think of all the names. A lot of them were out south of town, Squares and all those out there. They were all small dairies. and maybe they milked 10 or 15 or 20 cows. Had their own ground for their alfalfa and stuff. But you don't see that anymore. You just see all big dairies, you know.
Yeah.
Of course, that's the thing of the past. Couldn't make it go now anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
The last get-together, Herb Dutra's dad, after the war was over, he had a great big... When the war started, he had a couple of cases of kegs of wine down in the basement. And he says, after the war, he says, anybody left? And he had a great big party, super party out there, and invited all the veterans out there, and he opened up those kegs of wine, and we had a good time. Of course, they're all gone now. Herb just passed away. His son just passed away last year, and they still live on the ranch out there. He does, or she does. But it was really, really fun.
now what about that? The wine making. I guess you grew up in the last days of Prohibition.
Prohibition, yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever hear about secret stills and bootlegging and things
Yeah,
like
out there at Vanetti's, the old barn burned up out there. Still blew up, and I was in the fire department then. I was too young, but I remember I'm talking about old Sam Silva. Up in the hills, he had his stills back in the hills, and he'd bring it down and tell you a certain culvert out here, I'll leave you a case of booze, and I remember people talking about that, and but I remember the Vanetti fire out there. His still blew up and burnt the barn down, and of course at those days they didn't do anything about it, you know, like arresting them for having a still or something like that. And but I remember they always talked about Sam Silva having that's up at Recreation Beach. Have you ever been up to Monticello Dam?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that he owned that Recreation Beach, they called it. And I remember the mill used to have a party every year for all the men that worked at the mill. And my dad was there, and we'd go up there and Recreation Beach, and he'd have a little band, and we'd dance on that dance floor. Of course, we had to open up all the sides of it because it was hotter than heck then. There was no dam there then. Dixon's cooled off since this dam has been built, and all the irrigation around here. There was no irrigation at all until the dam was built.
I didn't realize that. That kind of changed the
It changed
climate
the
around.
environment, you know. I mean, because we got irrigation all the way around us, you know, and it makes it a little sultrier, but it makes it a lot cooler than what it used to be. I remember it used to get to 110, 112, and stay that way for weeks. And but you know, now all this irrigation around here, it sucks the cool air in from the bay. You know, you can almost, if we get 3 or 4 hot days here, the fog starts coming into San Francisco, so you can remember about the 5th day or 6th day, it starts cooling off. That's what we got now. Of the heat starts drawing the cool air in through the bay,
Mm-hmm.
and cools us off.
Now, well, we talked about the railroad, but what about the roads? They
Mostly
said the
all
Greyhound
gravel.
would come through. Mostly gravel.
Yeah. I can't remember the Main Street was all gravel, but I can remember Dad take me up to the wooden clinic, and this road out here at Pedrick Road, which was, they called it Road 99 West. Then there was 99 West and 99 East. It was gravel all the way to Woodland. Taking me up to the hospital, and of course that was the old hospital on Cross Street. Now they got the new hospital up there, but mostly all the roads around here were gravel, and finally they got them all, start blacktopping them, you know, and progress.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. I guess electricity was here when you were born.
Oh, it was here
wasn't
when we were
brought
here,
in.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're too young.
Huh?
You're too young.
Too young.
Yeah.
Well, I can remember, not me, but old Claude Koenig and the Koenig brothers out there, they didn't have electricity. I'd go out there and visit them out there, and they had these, it was a big deal when they got one of these Coleman lanterns. You know that, like these Coleman lanterns you use for hunting and stuff like that. It was a big deal when they got one of those things out there, and it really lit the house up.
Those are really bright.
Yeah.
Almost too bright.
Yeah. But they used to have this old, well, I still have an old Aladdin lamp here I got from Newcomb's over there when they sold out the ranch over at Bodega Bay.
Aladdin lamp.
Yeah.
That's a kerosene burner?
Kerosene. It's kerosene in the bottom, but then they had this great big, I broke the
glass part.
Glass part out. I got to go up to Greenville there, and it's up there in the hills where we have a home. They still carry those things, but they were the next best thing, and they put out quite a bit of light. It was a different type of wick that they had than the old kerosene lamps, and but then when the Cronics out there got these new Coleman lamps, boy, they were really. It was a thing really new for them. After the ranch was sold, the people who bought the ranch, they finally put electricity in the house. Well, Arnold Collier, he probably told you about that, because he farmed their ground after they quit farming. They farmed out there for a long time with an old D2 tractor, and boy, they saved every nickel they had.
Well, you talked about the Depression. You know, when I talk to people who live on farms and ranches, they always say, well, we had cows and we had a garden and, you know, we were self-sufficient. Now, what about the people here in town?
We had a garden.
You had a garden,
yeah,
but...
We had chickens.
Yeah.
And then we always, place where we could go get milk. And I remember a lot of times helping Dad churn butter. And, you know, when you was raising a family of 4 kids and making $25 a week, it was pretty tough. Of course, everything was cheap then, too, you know. You go buy a pair of shoes for $3. But we had our chickens, and Dad raised fryer chickens. And like we went over to Dave's across, Webb's across the street, we'd buy, he had squabs for sale all the time. And people in town, some people had their own hogs. Some people out the edge of town had their own dairy. I mean, I used to go out and buy milk all the time out at the Vedetti Ranch. That was Alex's dad, the one that had the still that burnt down. Then he put a dairy out there. And we had our garden. We had a big garden. And
so people in town were also kind of self-sufficient as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you had when he bought that house over there, it was 1/4 of an acre in town, and we had a lot of area, but like, well, right here, I bought the PG&E right-of-way here, and I used to raise a garden, and we had all our own, we got peach tree, and we got an apricot tree, and we do our own canning, still do our own canning, and I'm not in too much of a garden this year because I want to spend most of my time up at Lake Almanor. And but we got the peaches off the tree and the apricots off the tree. We got another peach tree ready to come off. And but you could get by. I mean, I remember uptown here. Well, it was an old lettuce shed then, but they had the government had a government handout. I mean, the people that wanted stuff, they could go in, they could get their beans, and they could get that hardtack butter, and they could get the flour and stuff to get by, you know. Nobody went hungry like it is today. I mean, I remember a lot of times, railroad track, hobos would come by, and they'd knock on the door, and they'd ask, is there any work I can do for a sandwich? Many a times, I can remember, Dad said, there's a wood pile out there, because we had a wood stove. And they would go out and they would chop wood and all they want. And they'd come up and Dad would give them a sandwich or 2 sandwiches. And they would say thank you very much and go out and chop wood for another 10 or 15 minutes and leave. But you wouldn't see that today for somebody to down and out. They want you to give them something for nothing in return. But I remember a lot of times the hobos would come by and sit out in the back porch and eat the sandwich. We never invite them in the house, but to eat a sandwich or whatever Mom had to give them, and they would do a little chore work around the yard or spade the garden and go on.
Now, you said they came into town on the train.
Oh yeah, yeah. A lot of, well, I think you can probably see pictures of old-time trains going through with all these guys riding on the trains. You don't see it very much anymore, but they used to be a lot of course they'd stop over there. We lived on North First Street, right past the bicycle garage and the big old house back in there. Well, I sold that a long time ago, and the train had stopped there and unhook, and the steam engine would go uptown here, and we had a big water tower up here. He'd fill up his water tender with a big tank up here, and they'd back up and hook up to that train, and he'd back up and get all the slack out of the couplings and take off. And he'd have to do that 2 or 3 times because Dixon's kind of on a hill. When you go to the railroad crossing, you take a look down the railroad tracks, and we're kind of on a hill. And my biggest thrill about the steam engines was those old Malays that come in. You know what a Malay is?
Yeah.
One of those trains that goes backwards. The engine, the engineers and stuff are on the front. It's you go to the museum in Sacramento and you'll see it.
I was there a couple of months ago.
Do you see that?
The conductor is right on the very front.
The engineers and the firemen
behind.
are on the front.
Yeah.
And
that's a gigantic engine.
yeah, there's 2 engines in one.
Oh.
But you know why they turned it around?
Why?
The history on it.
Mm-hmm.
The poor fireman and the engineer would almost suffocate when they went through the tunnels.
Mm-hmm.
And I got the history on the railroad. And so they finally turned the thing around. They'd almost suffocate when they're going through these big tunnels. Like in the Feather River, there's a lot of tunnels up there.
Yeah, they use that to go up the Sierras.
Yeah. Yeah, they'd have one of those, and they have a pusher and one in the middle, too. And, well, that thing would get up there, and I used to just love to hear that. You know, and they'd both get in time with it, both the steam things. And, I've seen them over 100 cars that they would pull through here. And then when they'd get to, couldn't get going, they'd put sand on the track. The engine, they had sand buckets on there, and they would put sand on the track for the, steel against steel. When they couldn't get going too good, they would put sand on the track and to get traction. But they would, couplings in each car, there was about 8 or 9 inches slack in each car. They would back up until they get the slack all pushed back, and then they would take off. And but we had trains stop here. We would get on the train and go to Sacramento. But now these commuter trains, they go through town they want to put a station here, but I don't think I'll ever see a station here. And we want to sell and get out, but I can't leave while my mother's still here. Like I said, her next birthday will be 102 years old, and but she's doing real well. Her family, they lived a long life, in the 90s, 100s. And my dad's family, they lived. My grandma, that's the only one of my grandma and grandpas. They were all gone before I was born. But she lived here in town. She didn't pass away until she was 97 or something like that. And but you never know when the good Lord wants to ring the bell.
Well, for Dixon people, he rings it kind of late. There's a lot of good old timers.
Yes, there is.
Around in Dixon. So we're collecting some good history.
Well, I hope I give you something about Dixon and my time here.
Yeah, we kind of went down the list of everything. Anything you want to add? Anything we didn't talk about that we should have talked about?
I don't know. I enjoy the town. Of course, the town is big now. I mean, it's growing, but you can either grow with it or sit back and take it easy. I'm going to sit back and take it easy. Let the other guys take care of it. Like I said, I enjoyed the fire department. We really had a good fire department, good get-together, a lot of good people in it. And, of course, it's different now. And I belonged to the Legion for a while. I got to go back to the Legion, and I served my time in the service, and got home safe and sound. Didn't get hurt too bad. But I've had a good life so far. Wonderful family, close family, and we're really close. And I like to travel more. Of course, I've been to Alaska 2 or 3 times. Drove up there once, and it's gone for 3 or 4 months. But I think I'm going to fly up the next time. My daughter-in-law, she has family up there in Palmer, Alaska, so when we fly up, we have a place to stay and use their cars to run around with. But I tell you, the most beautiful place is, Alaska's not pretty. Some places it's pretty, but Canada's beautiful. When we travel through Canada, it's absolutely out of this world.
Well, I'm an honorary Canadian, but we'll have to talk about that after we turn off this tape.
Yeah.
We're supposed to talk about Dixon.
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
well, I've enjoyed my time here. That's the end of it.
No, not the end. We just pop this in.
I don't know what I'm going to talk about from now on.
Well, I guess we'll just about the end.
About the end, yeah.
Okay, I got the thing going again. We just ran out of tape.
Like I say, the best time in Dixon was when, of course, when I was growing up and my folks and family was here. It was on the weekends when all the stores were closed, and that's when we got together and played baseball and basketball and roller skate down the street and play kick the can, and we had to make our own games up, you know. And that was the best time, I think, of my time in Dixon. Is now it's got to keep up with the time and keep it running, I guess. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're just one part of this project. We're going to talk to more than 30, and so we get everybody's different viewpoint. Yeah. So,
well, like you were saying, you've talked to mostly farmers. Well,
yeah, it was good that we talked to a town person now.
Oh, I remember Ike Beckley. He had a clothing store here, and in fact, his daughter lived next door here, and
he had a men's clothing
store.
A haberdashery.
He had anything, everything you want. When he closed up, he had he had everything, and the old hats that he had up there. I remember he'd give me some of those old straw hats, you know, those old round rim hats and a square top or round top. And but he was, I think that was the only clothing store in town. And that was where there's underneath the Mason's lodges upstairs. He had the building downstairs. Because next door to him was Alexander's Meat Market. And then next to that was the Gem Drug Store. And next to that was the bank. But, and we had 2 barbershops in town. Leo Lukovich and Hedges had a barbershop here in town. And what else can I tell you? We had all the Mackenzies. They were sheep buyers and wool buyers. And we had this big warehouse over here that belonged to the Grange, and they used to ship wool in. The grain had come in by sacks, you know, on the trucks. Everything was sacks from the harvesters. And down here they had another big warehouse where this manufacturing place is down there, Morris's, but it burnt. They had a fire there, and then other big fire in town we had was the Ford garage caught a fire, and boy, that was terrible. We had a station number 2 over here. It was so foggy that night. I took the old Fabico. It was a pumper. I took that thing over, and I had to sit on top of the seat to look over the windshield to see. It was so foggy you couldn't see a half a block here in town. In fact, that building was totally involved before you could come over there to Dawson's and you couldn't see it. It was that foggy. And it burnt down. We couldn't save it. It was a tin building with all the cars on the inside. That's where McGimpsey lost a bunch of his old antique Model T Fords he had parked in there. And that's where the Frosty is now. And well, before they had that in there, oh, in between the Frosty, because next to that was the big old Liberty Stables. They had a great big barn in there where years ago they had horses and stuff, you know, in town. And great big Liberty Stable was in there, and they tore that down. And what else could I say? Oh, you said something there about electric cars. There was only 2 electric cars in town. Mrs. Curry had an electric car, and Mrs. Moss had an electric car. And they had the old handle out in front where you'd steer it. You'd hear that thing go down. The only thing you'd hear is, she would go to town, and Mrs. Curry would come into town. But I don't know whatever happened to those cars.
They were probably old cars when you were a kid, or were they?
They were old cars, yeah, because I had an old Model T Ford one time. And when I, to go make money, I went and hoed weeds around the telephone pole, PG&E poles. Got 2 bits of pole. And I'd take this old Model T and as a pickup, and I'd drive down 25 poles, and I'd hoe 25 poles that way, and go back and hoe 25 poles this way, and then gnats, holy mackerel, and gnats out in the country. Our colleague probably told you about the gnats.
No,
Don't you know what a gnat is?
Oh, I know what a gnat is.
Oh,
yeah.
man,
They're pretty bad.
tell you.
Yeah.
And but Morgan, he ran the PG&E thing over here, which there's no office here in town anymore. They closed it up. They all moved to Vacaville. But any of the old time stuff I can tell you about. Oh, we had a lot of grain fires, I tell you. But we did the best we could. We put them out. And the old slaughterhouse out here in Macy's, I can remember, every Friday they would kill pigs. And the pigs weren't quite dead when they went into the scalding pit. And talk about screaming and squeaking. You could hear it all over town. It was every Friday they killed pigs out there. And they'd run them through the scrubberies, you know, they'd put them in that hot water to scald them with lye. They'd run them through those scrub brushes to get the hair off of them. Then they'd take them, finish butchering, then they'd take them, gut them, and finish cleaning them all out and butchering them. But that was a big operation out there. Them and Mace had it, and then Mace sold it to Hill and somebody, and Hill sold it to Armour. And then Armour worked out and closed it up. Stovins was the last slaughterhouse here in town. Well, there's still a slaughterhouse out there. They just slaughterhouse lambs now, but now they're importing lambs cheaper than we can raise them here. Because my son, as a fireman, he raises sheep and goats. He uses the goats for
clearing field.
They're down in Oakland now. You know, they have the goat project down there, the county and state, to eat fire trails. And actually, they had a fire down there 2 weeks ago, and they ran up to where they had cleared it all off. And the fire stopped. And I think he's going. Los Angeles wants him down there, and I think he might be going down there with his goats. And he has 4 Peruvian men work for him. And of course, he can stay away, you know, and he has to bring them food and stuff. And but the sheep business has been good, but since Superior bought a place in Australia, well, in years to come, you're not going to see any sheep in California. They're importing cheaper than we can raise them. But that's years ago. I mean, everything was fenced around here, and there's a big sheep industry around here. Everybody had sheep, but now there's no fences. And he uses electric fence, but he uses, and they get used to electric fence. They won't come close to it. And he's up in the hills over there, where he goes. You know, he's got these Pyrenees dogs too. You know what a Pyrenees dog is? A great big dog. And he doesn't have any trouble with coyotes and stuff. they'll kill coyotes over here in winters, and he had his sheep over there. Well, those dogs would go out and kill a coyote, and he'd haul it into the camp, and it just like say, "See, I'm doing my job." And but he kind of got in trouble there in Oakland because the dogs were killing all those foxes. There were red foxes. But he says, "I can't help it, you know."
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess Dixon won't be Lambtown anymore.
No, I guess they're going to have it again this year. Reading the paper, they're going to have their. Oh, they'll still have their festival. It's just like Vacaville. They still have a festival. They used to have a garlic festival, but it's when they moved out. Well, it moved down to Gilroy, where they have their festival now.
Yeah.
And there's very few sheep around here. There's a few sheep in Rio Vista, but it just doesn't pay. Not when you can down there, when you can buy a lamb down there from the people in Australia for $15 and have it slaughtered and have it shipped to California, and still sell it cheaper than what you can, because you know our rent here is pretty high and stuff, and it's just not in the cards.
Yeah, well, that's history. Things keep changing all the time,
Yeah.
and who knows what Dixon will be like in the future. We're just
Oh,
supposed to
it'll
talk
be the
about-
same. It'll be a bedroom community, you know.
Yeah, well, most likely.
Yeah.
Well, we're supposed to talk about the past, though, anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
So, well, I guess we've done it, huh?
I hope so. I don't know whether I helped you out or not.
Well, you have. Well, I guess I should say on behalf of the library, the Dixon Library, thanks for taking a little time and talking about what you remember about the good old days of Dixon. I guess I'll turn this off now.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
Dixon's a nice town. I like it, but we have. It's like the area I live here. I mean, it's not like it used to be. I mean, Christ, you got. But we don't want to stay around here that much longer. We have a couple of rental houses in town. I'd like to get rid of them, but it sounds kind of goofy when you can't afford to sell them to pay the capital gains on it. That's the truth. There's a couple of houses I want to sell, and I didn't pay very much for them. I picked up FHA loans, but they went fluey on. Now you can sell them and make $100,000 on it, but who's going to pay 30%, 40% tax on it?
I heard the trick is to trade.
Well, the trick is try and change your address and go over there for 2 years, and then you can call it your home. You can sell it with no tax.